Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer 55551, and I am back with a My 2 Cent video for this week, for the week of February 15th to the 21st, 2026, where I take a look at a couple of stories that caught my attention and give you my thoughts and my opinion on them. Obviously, the so-called rumored Nintendo Direct that some folks, leakers, were claiming out there, obviously it did not turn out to be true, which, you know, I'm not really surprised, but at the same time, I'm not losing sleep over it. It would have been nice, but hey, Nintendo decides when they want to do a Direct and everything like that. Maybe we'll see one in March, maybe in April or something like that. We'll see, to be exact, but obviously a Direct did not happen this week, at the very least, as some have claimed it was. Some had claimed that it was going to happen. Also, I'll try to do another video and everything like that. There's something that's coming up this weekend that I'm going to do and all. It involves family and everything like that. If I could squeeze it in, that would be great. If not, then, you know, that probably was one of the reasons I didn't have another video up that would normally be published on Wednesday and everything. So I'll try to do so if I get the chance and everything. But anyway, we got four stories to cover this week, including a shadow drop by Nintendo in regarding Xenoblade Chronicles X with a Switch 2 version. Concerns regarding the PS6 with the possibility that it may come later than we thought. Plus, also, a situation surrounding Blue Point Games that happened on this week and all. The folks, Square Enix comments on basically, you know, with Final Fantasy VII Part 3 coming out and how they feel like the multi-platform part won't hurt them. Plus, they also come out and give their reason in regards of why they went the game key card when the Switch 2 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Integrate, along with Rebirth coming to the Switch 2 and all. And of course, the possibility that Nintendo we could see the Switch 2 get a price hike and all. If you're interested where I got the source of these information, links will be in the description of this video, assuming you're watching this either on YouTube or Patreon. And of course, the timestamps will also be there if there's a certain part of this video you wish to skip to or anything like that. But before we get started, I like to do what I like to call the quick My 2 Cents, stories that kind of caught my attention, but I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details and all. The first one has to do with that Cyber 2 Connect has announced a new Dot Hack game for its 30th anniversary, I believe called Dot Hack Zero, though. I mean, the Dot Hack series, I've played on and off. I haven't played as much, though, but it certainly has had its following, so. It had originally started out on the PS2 and all, and so to see the series also make some degree over to Nintendo's platform, I think with the Dot Hack GU, if I'm saying the name right. I could get the names wrong or anything, but in either case, it's nice that we're getting another Dot Hack game after all, so nice to see it's been announced, though. I don't know if any platform has been announced or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this game make its way to the Switch 2. Maybe the Switch 1, but I'm more leaning towards it could also most likely will make its way to the Switch 2 and other platforms. We also learned that supposedly a leaker is claiming that a Chrono Trigger remake is in development and all. This one has been rumored for quite some time. There was supposedly a claim by someone at Square Enix that made a comment that gave the indication that it was in development, but had the backtrack of saying that some folks heard that the wrong way and everything. So it remains to be seen if that is going to happen or not. Chrono Trigger is loved by a lot of folks, especially who are into the JRPG and everything. It would be interesting to see if a remake does happen, if it goes down the route of the remake of something like what we saw with Final Fantasy VII Remake or Integrate, or something along the lines of, you know, I think one of the Dragon Quest games that got a remake, to be exact. Honestly, in my opinion, if this game does exist, I think if they're going to do a remake or a remaster of it, I think it should go down the HD 2D route, though. At least that's how I think it should, though. But time will ultimately tell if that is the case or not, though. We also learned that supposedly on an Australian eShop and Finnish retailer there, it seems to post a release date for the Switch 2 exclusive Duskblood, looking at the 27th of March, though. Now, there are some who are kind of surprised by this, but others are believing that this is nothing more than a placeholder and all, and Honestly, I'm more in the camp of thinking this is probably a placeholder, though. I find it hard to believe Nintendo would release that game around that time, considering we almost know next to nothing other than a few details here and there, such as it being a PvPvE game, at least according to that's what From Software is saying, to basically the fact that this game's been in development for quite a while, and we only had one trailer that was shown of this game, and this was during the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct back last year in April and all. So I find it hard to believe that they're going to release it at March 27th, though. I could be wrong, but I just can't see that happening, considering we don't really know a lot, and we don't know if they're going to put out like a demo for people to try out or not. So my guess is that this is most likely a placeholder. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm kind of seeing it and all. We also learned that the developers of Stellar Blade could be eyeing a Switch 2 release of one of their games and everything like that. This has been going back and forth for quite some time, as there are reports that the developer Shift-Up could be porting over Stellar Blade to not only the Xbox consoles, but to the Nintendo Switch 2. Some are pointing to that, considering that the developers gifted their employees with Nintendo Switch 2 systems and everything. That would be interesting to see this game come to the Switch 2 and see how well it would run on a system like the Nintendo Switch 2. We've seen a lot of games come to the Switch 2 and they seem to run well and everything. Not every game, but certainly a lot of games indeed. And I'm very curious to see how this one would run should it happen at all. We know that the developers Shift-Up are working on a sequel to Stellar Blade, that is a given. But whether or not that game will be released onto other systems, or it will be exclusive or time exclusive to the PS5 or the PS6 or whatever the case may be, who knows. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Stellar Blade appear on other systems, whether it's the Xbox Series X and S or the Switch 2. We also learned that Nintendo has issued takedown to around 13 of these so-called Switch emulation sites, though. There's been some back and forth over the emulations for a while and everything. My position on emulations in general is it's sort of a gray area, to be exact, though. I understand there are those who argue in terms of the game preservation side, and I don't completely disagree with that argument to a certain extent, though. But I can also understand some arguments of those who may not be happy with the idea of emulating a game that has just recently released and so forth. There was a situation a couple years ago before Metroid Dread came out that an article by Polygon put out in terms of how to emulate Metroid Dread onto your Nintendo Switch, which garnished some backlash, and supposedly Nintendo did not send a review copy, at least that's the claim, to Polygon and everything. So it's a gray area when it comes to emulation, though. So at least that's how I'm seeing it all. We also learned that supposedly fans are debating about a sort of interesting that we could see in the remake of the God of War trilogy. For those who are not familiar, during when the original God of War games came out, one of the things they had was what many dubbed as a mini sex game, where Kratos, supposedly gets his freak on with basically several women and all. They don't actually show the scene. It's just a mini game, and you'll see something like the desk like shaking or everything like that. So it was funny but interesting at the same time. You complete it once, you get some red orbs that basically power up Kratos and everything. There's been some debate whether this will appear or not, and some of this has to do with some of the directions Sony has been going, though. We don't know much about the remake of the God of War trilogy at this time. We'll have to wait and see. My personal opinion is that given the fact that the game is M-rated, though, and even with these so-called mini sex games that were in the original God of War trilogy, I don't think they should take them out. I know some may have different views on it, but I don't think that they should or anything like that. I think they should just stay and keep it how it is, though. I mean, Kratos was a different person during the original Greek trilogy compared to the Norse mythology trilogy and everything. But we'll see. We have yet to see any gameplay footage of the God of War trilogy remake, so time will ultimately tell if that is the case and all. We also learned that, speaking of with God of War, it seems that one of the original creators isn't happy with this spin-off of the Son of Spartan, which is basically a prequel to before the God of War trilogy happened, when Kratos was, a child and everything like that. The creator wasn't really pleased with what he has seen so far. I've yet to try the game out, so I can't say 100% certain if I think it's good or bad. I've read some reviews. It's getting sort of a mixed response, to be exact. I still want to try the game out myself and see what it is. I am a fan of those Metroidvania type of games, so maybe this might be good. I mean, who knows, to be exact, though. So whether you agree with what the original creator has to say, that's entirely up to you and all. We also learned that supposedly the upcoming open world Crimson Desert won't have a difficulty option at launch and everything. However, the claim is also that don't expect it to be like a Souls-like game either and all. So kind of interesting that they decided not to add a difficulty option or anything like that. Is it the end of the world if they don't add one? Not really. I don't think it is. I think it would have been nice if they added it in, but it's not something I'm losing absolute sleep over and everything like that. And in an interesting surprise announcement and all, we learned that basically Phil Spencer is retiring from Xbox, and supposedly Sarah Bond will be leaving. A new person is going to be taking over from, for Phil Spencer and everything like that. This was a very interesting announcement and everything like that, though. I would say Phil Spencer's time at Xbox, I would say, in my view, has been mixed at best. I will give him credit for doing what he can to save the Xbox brand following the whole situation surrounding Xbox One and all. But there's also been some questionable decisions that he's made that also has had some impact, including how praise of some games, but then they got canceled and everything. The whole buy-in studios and all. So his tenure in charge of Xbox has been mixed, although some of it you could point to Microsoft really taking over the Xbox division in general and all. There's been some criticism towards it. This new person supposedly made a comment in regards about basically, she was part of, the AI team and everything, but she's talking about that she thinks video games is an art form and that they don't want AI slop and everything like that. So we'll see what she does, though. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt for the time being and see what she is capable of. But I will say it will be very interesting to see what she does once, Phil Spencer steps down for good and everything like that. So I wish her the best of luck. Let's see what she does for the Xbox brand. I know there are some who are very mixed on this, though, but we'll see if this person taking over for Phil Spencer was the right call or not and all. And in the movie and TV show part of the Quick My Two Cent, we had a second trailer that was shown for the Mandalorian and Guru trailer, and I will say this one I thought was an improvement. I thought this trailer was definitely better. The tone for the trailer was definitely better than, I say, like the last couple of trailers I've seen for The Mandalorian and Guru and all, though. I know there are some people who are still mixed on this trailer, to be exact, but I mean, we'll see how things play out when that movie comes out and everything this year and all. And finally, last but not least, we are learning that Christian Bale will be voicing Amy Rose in the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog 4 movie. For those who remember seeing Sonic the Hedgehog 3 when that was out in theaters, I think that is the best entry into the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, though. She made an appearance defeating several Metal Sonics that were surrounding, Sonic the Hedgehog and all. It will be interesting to see how she is portrayed in the fourth Sonic the Hedgehog movie, considering the fact that she did act as a love interest for Sonic, and it'll be interesting if that plays out as well. It'll also be interesting if we see any other characters make an appearance, like Biggs the cat, or Biggs the cat, and like Rogue the bat or anything. So it'll be interesting if other characters start making appearance, or even Cream, the rabbit and all. So that would be interesting. And of course, there's Shadow the Hedgehog, which anybody who saw the end credit scene for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 knows that, judging by that scene with him with the shoe, though, he survived and all. So it will be very interesting to see what role Amy Rose will play in the upcoming, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 and all. Okay, with the Quick My 2 Cent part now done, along with the movie and TV show part of the Quick My 2 Cent, we'll get started with our first story. And this one has to do with the Switch 2 and the possibility of a price hike and all. Now, around the time when Nintendo did their Nintendo Switch 2 Direct back last April, the announcement of that system and the price point for a lot of things came off the heels at the time of basically when it was announced that tariffs were being imposed and everything like that. This raised concern about the possibility that the system that the original price, suggested retail price, was going to go up, and Nintendo had to reevaluate some of the situation. Eventually, they came back with an announcement, and it came back both good and bad. Good news was the system and the games were not going to see a price hike, although at the time of that announcement, Mario Kart World being at $80 was considered controversial to some folks out there, although the game seems to be doing pretty well so far and all. However, the bad news is that this came at the price of the accessories, and while there may be some accessories that may or may not appeal to everybody, there's no denying that this certainly had an impact, especially for those who are thinking about getting the Switch 2 Pro controller. And around that time, though, my concern was that while the tariff certainly did not have the negative impact on the price point for the Switch 2 at the time, there was worry that it was only a matter of time before Nintendo may have to raise the price and everything like that. And I thought that it was possible this could have an impact, like if those who were thinking about picking up the Switch 2 during the holidays. Now, that has not materialized, but with the whole situation surrounding the RAM shortage and the stuff being used for these AI data centers and everything like that, we've started to see price increase for other systems as well. We saw this, with stuff like the PS5 to even basically the Xbox Series X and S seeing a price increase and all, to even it having an impact possibly on, those who are into like PC gaming. And for the most part, Nintendo has seemed to have avoided any price hike, at least for now. However, some analysts are believing that Nintendo this year, or it could be a matter of time, that Nintendo may have to raise the price of the Switch 2. They did raise the price of the Switch 1, and the Switch 2 didn't get a price hike, but we could see a scenario where Nintendo may end up raising the price for the Switch 2 and all. In an article posted on Nintendo Life, it reads that, quote, the rising demand for RAM and AI data centers and the associated rising costs are having a massive effect across the tech world, and with Sony reporting pushing back the launch of announced the PS5 successor, I'll get to that in part 2, Nintendo is considering raising the price in 2026 too, according to a new Bloomberg report, saying it's a paywall there. Speaking to people familiar with its plans, Bloomberg's reporting that Sony is, I'll get to the Sony part for the next console, and they're saying that Nintendo is looking to approach what the article says being considered Ramageddon and all. The article reads that, quote, close rival Nintendo company, which has contributed to the surplus demand in 2025 after its new Switch 2 console drove shortage cards purchases, is also contemporary, the word contemporary, if I'm saying the name correctly, raising the price of that device in 2026. People familiar with the plan say. Sony and Nintendo representatives didn't respond to requests for comments, though. Earlier this year, Mikio partner predict that Nintendo will be forced to follow suit and raise hardware prices as its competitors have. Nintendo president was asked about the possibility increase in an interview with Koto Shombin back in January. Again, I apologize if I didn't get the name correctly, but refused to be drawn on plans at the time, saying, I can't comment on hypotheses. Now, do I think Nintendo will raise the price of the Switch 2? I would say there's a good chance that could technically happen, though. Given the whole RAM shortage and the whole thing going on with the data centers and AI and everything like that, I would not be shocked if Nintendo decided to raise the price of the Switch 2. It would be unfortunate, though, to be exact, though, but it would not shock me at all. I mean, this whole thing with the RAM shortage and all, and the somewhat situation with tariffs, which there was a ruling on that as well, and everything like that, though. It will be very interesting to keep an eye on what Nintendo does, though. Should they decide to raise the price of the Switch 2, it will be interesting to see what kind of impact this will have for those who are thinking about buying a Switch 2. Will folks hold off on buying the Switch 2 and everything like that? Will it have a negative impact, or will it have no impact on Nintendo at all? So we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out, but I will say I would not be shocked if a price hike for the Switch 2 does happen this year and all. I mean, it's possible it may not happen at all, but you know what? Given where things are with the whole RAM situation and everything like that, I just would not be shocked if Nintendo does that, though. So overall, we haven't seen a price hike for the Switch 2 yet, though, but don't be shocked if that does happen and all. And should it, like I said, should it happen and everything, it will be very interesting to see what kind of impact that will have on Nintendo. It's possible it could have a negative impact, but it's also possible it may have no impact at all and everything. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to part 2. And this one has to do with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the developers talking about how it doesn't seem like they're going to have issues bringing part 3 over, which will be a multi-platform release, and a comment made by the Final Fantasy Remake director in terms of regarding game key cards as well for the Switch 2. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of my 2 cent video, and for this one we're going to be taking a look at some comments made about not only about how Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, using the game key cards, but a comment made in regards to part 3 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake series in terms of development for that game and all. Now, after Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out for the PS5, Square Enix started to push away from basically putting their games just, or at least a majority of the games exclusively onto, the PS5 and everything, and started to put their games on multiple platforms and so that was sort of their direction they have been going lately, though. Earlier this year, though, Final Fantasy VII Remake was making its way over to the Nintendo Switch 2, along with the Xbox Series X and S, and supposedly, at least in the Switch 2, it sounded like the game did very well indeed, and supposedly it did fine on the Xbox systems as well. We know that Rebirth will be on its way sometime over the summer, though. We know that's coming to the Switch 2, and I believe the Xbox Series X and S, though. But questions started to remain of exactly what can we expect when part 3 comes out in terms of optimization, and in terms of will that have an impact on the game or anything like that. Well, one of the folks who worked on it sort of weighed in on the situation, and it sounds like it's not going to compromise really anything, at least according to what they are saying, though. In an article from Video Game Chronicles, it reads that the director of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy has explained the details why the third chapter multi-platform release won't result in a compromised quality. In an interview with Automation, the director was asked his opinion on certain players, suggesting that the decision to develop Part 3 with Xbox Series S and Switch 2 in mind, rather than develop primarily for Sony's console and optimize at a later date, could mean the overall game may be compromised to run better on those systems. He replied that the decision to go multi-platform with the third game will not in any way lower the quality of the third installment, adding, "Our development structure simply doesn't work that way to begin with. I suppose I just have to keep saying it." When it was put to him that some players would consider this marketing talk and the developers would never speak negative about their game before release, this person went on to say that he'd like to take this opportunity to explain the details why there's no need for concern. He went on to explain the development process in details in terms of CPU, GPU, RAM, and storage media, noting that Switch 2 version is a game keycard. He explained there was no need to shrink data just to fit on a slower cartridges and everything. As for RAM, Switch 2's amp of memory means there's little concerns there, he said. The Xbox Series S does have its limits, but we already optimized for each platform individually to the absolute limit, so memory constraint on one platform doesn't impose restrictions on others. In terms of CPU, I'm explaining that the team's philosophy is that if a game runs at 30 frames per second on Switch 2 or Series S, it should be able to hit 60 on a higher end platform. In other words, we don't design games to fully saturate high-end CPUs at 30, he said. Instead, on hardware that needs additional CPU headroom, we scale density elements like increasing the number of NPCs in town. As a result, towns feel more alive on higher-end specs, while lower-spec systems may display fewer NPCs. So even when factoring in the Nintendo Switch 2 or Xbox Series S, support CPU related bottlenecks are unlikely. Finally, in regards to the GPU, he explained, as our fundamental principles, we do not design assets to meet the lowest baseline. Instead, we create them for high-end environments first. The team therefore develops with high-specs PC as the lead platform, and then process to scale the game down accordingly until it hits the lower specification. He also said that PS5 and even PS4 Pro are categorized as mid-range platforms by the studio, saying compared to a high-end PC, texture size may differ by roughly 1.5 to 2 times MESH loading, by 1.5 to 2 times, and polygon counts by more than 3 times. That's how the big difference can be. So basically, also he points out that they're sticking with Unreal Engine 4 for Part 3 and all. So basically, it sounds like that this multi-platform approach for Part 3 isn't going to have a huge compromise as some folks had fear it might be. They say that, yeah, you might see some lower amount of CPUs than you would like visiting in town and everything, but that shouldn't have a negative impact on the game overall, which, again, I'm not a game developer, so I don't know how accurate this is, but if what they're saying is true, it sounds like you shouldn't worry too much if you're going to pick up Part 3 for like the Switch 2, or if you have an Xbox Series S for that matter. So that, if that's the case, that certainly is a good thing as well. Another thing they pointed out is the whole situation in regards of the game key cards, which for Switch 2, that's been kind of a sticky situation, as there are those who aren't a fan of the game key cards. In general, though, I'm more in the camp of the fact that while I'm not a fan of the game key cards, I'm not outright against them, and I do think there are certainly some ups and downs with it, and I definitely would prefer a game key card over a code in the box situation. Those type of games, though, at least that's my view, though. But he basically weighed in, the director of the Final Fantasy VII Remake weighed in about the whole game key card situation. He said, quote, there's simply no way around game key cards in certain respects. If you compare loading directly from a game cartridge containing all the data to loading from the Nintendo Switch 2's internal storage, the loading speed difference is roughly double. Some have expressed concerns that multi-platform development may impose constraints not only on graphics, but even on game design itself. However, this is precisely why we didn't choose a cartridge. Our game design isn't built around loading all data up front with nothing further being loaded afterwards. Even during gameplay, data is constantly swapped in and out, and given that premise, the loading speed from a game card would inevitably be insignificant, leading to stress to the player. In addition, with currently available storage capability, there is practically limitation to that the full game data simply won't fit in the first place. However, as long as we can secure high-speed storage read speed, such as SSD or UFS on Switch 2, the design we aim for becomes achievable within the scope of optimizing for each platform. For the third game in the trilogy, we process with development with the goal of delivering large-scale experience similar to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, so please rest assured on that point. In the past, we faced with particular issues related to load speed and storage capability we couldn't resolve, we had to decide not to release on Nintendo system. However, Nintendo Switch 2's performance is impressive, and with the game keycard format, Final Fantasy VII Remake released the games become possible. I believe the only thing I can do is continue to sincerely communicate that fact to users. So, again, I don't think the argument about game keycards are going to go away, as there are those who love or hate the situation. But as I said before, I can understand a reason for the game keycards to be used. Given the file size for Final Fantasy VII Remake, that's at 90 gigabytes and everything, and if that's the best Square Enix could do in terms of optimizing the game, then I could see a justification to using the game key cards over a physical cartridge and everything like that. Still, I still think there is some arguments that could be made about the game key cards, especially when you're looking at games that are below 64 gigabytes but are still using a game key card nevertheless. And I think that's where I can understand some of the arguments against it, though. And we've had his thing about the loading speed and everything like that. This sounds very similar to an argument we heard when Ubisoft, talked about porting Star Wars Outlaw to the Nintendo Switch 2 about loading things and everything like that. And which, if that is true, then I do think that is an issue Nintendo does need to address, and the folks who manufacture the Switch 2 cartridges, though, that for this, in case developers want to bring, their games to the Switch 2 and want to put the full game into the cartridge, though. So I get where this developer is going. I don't completely disagree with what he is saying, though, but I also do see the fact that the game keycard situation isn't going to go away anytime soon. This is still going to be viewed controversial to some folks out there, though, and I know there's going to be some who choose not to purchase a game with a game keycard, though. But to me, it's not something I'm losing sleep over if it's well within reason if you have to use the game keycard. But I do think if it's going to be below 64 gigabytes, I think the game should be into the cartridge fully, though. And if loading time and speed is an issue, then I think this is something the folks not only who manufacture these Switch 2 cartridges, but I think Nintendo itself needs to do a better job addressing this, to be exact, though. So overall, it does sound like that we shouldn't be too much worried about with Part 3 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake and all. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Part 3 is going to look and play, especially on systems like the Switch 2 and all. And as far as the director's comment in terms of the game key cards for the Switch 2, like I said, I don't completely disagree with what he's saying. I do think there is an argument in favor of game key cards, but at the same time, I don't think the whole issue with game key cards are going to be going away anytime soon and all. And I think it's still going to remain a controversial view for certainly Nintendo fans and everything. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to Part 3. And this one has to do with the possibility that the PS6 could be pushed back to maybe 2028 and 2029, at least according to a report coming out. Plus, also, Sony's decision to shut down Bluepoint Games and all. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 3 of my Mind You Sent video for this week. And for this one, we're going to be taking a look at the PS6, and of course a story reported that Sony has shut down Bluepoint Games and all. Now, obviously, after the PS5 comes out, though, we know that for a lot of these companies, especially with Sony, they start work on their next system and all, and that really isn't really too shocking. Nintendo's done that, even Microsoft has done that as well and all. But with the current situation, with the RAM shortage kind of situation, everything like that, this has started to throw some questions in doubt, combined with the fact that both the Xbox Series X and S and the PS5 didn't get off to the best of starts, ranging from the whole situation surrounding COVID to the whole shipment storage situation and everything. And so there's been some questions of whether or not this generation may last a bit longer than what some people were initially thinking, and a report come out seemed to indicate that it is possible we may not see the PS6 until like either 2028 or 2029, maybe 2030 for that matter though. Anyway, in an article from Video Game Chronicles, it goes over basically the whole RAM shortage situation. They talked about, the possibility of raising, the price for the Switch 2. But now, according to the article, it points out that, quote, citing sources familiar with Sony's strategy thinking, the article claims that Sony Group Corp is now considering pushing back the debut of its next PlayStation console to 2028 or even 2029. Now, obviously, Sony has not said anything at this time and all, but given the current situation that we are in right now with the whole RAM shortage situation though, I would not be shocked if it is being pushed back though. And as I said before, with the whole, shipping situation back in 2020, especially with the whole pandemic, aka COVID happening back then though, the PS5 never really got off to the best start along with the Xbox Series X and S compared to where they are right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sony sort of holds back talking about the PS6, maybe not until around we get like maybe 2027, and then maybe we hear something in 2028 or 2029 though. But there are some who are kind of celebrating this, thinking this is a good thing indeed and all, and maybe it is to be exact though, because like I said, I really didn't think the PS5 has yet to hit its stride at this point and everything. So perhaps this article could be true and everything like that. Obviously, we have to wait to hear from Sony, hear what they have to say and all, but I would not be shocked if basically it is pushed to 2028 or 2029, or hell, even to 2030 for that matter. And continuing on with Sony, though, we've learned that they made what many are going to be viewed as a very controversial decision, and that is the shutdown of Bluepoint Games. Now, they have done basically ports of like Demon Souls and everything. They did the Shadow of Colossus for the PS4, though. It basically announced that they are shutting down studio, the Austin-based development team that was acquired back in 2021. And everything like that. Basically, Sony has confirmed this, and basically points out a statement saying, quote, Bluepoint Games is an incredible, talented team, and their technical expertise has delivered expectation experience from the PlayStation community. We thank them for their passionate, creative, and craftsmanship, though. The comments are really ripping. A lot of folks are really ripping into Sony on this situation. It's also worth pointing out that Bluepoint was considered working on a live service game and everything until Sony pulled the plug on that one, though. Basically a God of War title, though, and everything. And around the time Sony started to backtrack on its live service push, though. And like I said, not everyone is happy with this announcement. Some of the comments are like really ripping Sony apart, though. And it kind of highlights one of the problems that I feel like the PS5 has gotten in this generation, though, and the way Sony has handled it, everything. While I do not deny the fact that the PS5 has been a success for Sony, it has sold very well from them, don't get me wrong, it's also come at the expense of the fact that we've seen, let's just say, a lack of the kind of first-party games that we would see from Sony and everything. And a lot of this comes to the fact that they are basically the cost of how much some of these games are made, especially given, ballooning development price, to Sony's push for really pushing the live service thing that we've seen with folks like under Jim Ryan and currently with Herman Holtz to some extent, though, that really forces Sony to backtrack on that, though. Remember what happened with Concord? That's a very good example. And it feels like they wasted this generation in a way. They could have put out some amazing games. And there are some main games that they have put out, though. Ghost of Yotai is a very good example of that, though. But it just feels like they wasted this generation. And I think that is a bit unfortunate. To be exact, though, I really think they should have focused. I mean, most of the time it felt like they were focusing just on the AAA type of a game to have for their first party games when they could have like some of those smaller titles. I think look at Asteroid Bot, for example. That's a good smaller title indeed. So I do think there's some criticism leveled towards Sony, especially with the whole Bluepoint Studio situation. It's also been reported that supposedly that it was made up of former folks who worked at Retro Studio. So who knows? Maybe those folks will go back to Retro Studio, although there are claims that some of the folks at Bluepoint could be moved around and all. I've also heard comments like Nintendo should buy Bluepoint Studio or Microsoft should buy Bluepoint Studio. So, I mean, there's some comments back and forth about that though. But still, this has definitely caused some backlash towards Sony and all. How big of a backlash? Who knows though? It could be huge, it could be small to be exact though, but it does highlight sort of the criticism of some of Sony's first party outing that we've seen so far this generation, along with PS5 and everything like that. So overall, I would say in terms of the PS6 though, I wouldn't be shocked if it's pushed back to 2028 or 2029 or even to 2030 for that matter. Obviously nothing's been confirmed, but it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And the closing of Bluepoint Games basically highlights, I think, one of the problems this generation, at least for the PS5, Sony has faced. Yes, the PS5 has been a success for Sony, don't get me wrong, but the somewhat lack of first-party games from them and their focus on live service games really has, I think, also been sort of a disappointment for this generation. In other words, the PS5, I think, has been both a success but a disappointment at the same time and all. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to our fourth and final part, and this one has to do with a surprise shadow drop for Xenoblade Chronicles X, basically a Switch 2 edition and all. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with our fourth and final part of our My 2 Cent video for this week. And for this one, I'm going to be taking a look at a interesting surprise update / shadow drop for Xenoblade Chronicles X and all. Now, last year, Nintendo along with Monolith released what I kind of viewed as sort of like a swan song or like in a way, a final send-off for the Switch 1 by releasing Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Nintendo Switch. Now, back then, though, we did get 3 Xenoblade Chronicles games on the Switch 1. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 being the launch title for the Switch 1 back then. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, sort of a remaster or remake of the first game that originally was released on the original Nintendo Wii, and of course a new entry with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and all. But X was always one that kind of was sort of absent, and many have wondered if that game would ever make its way over to the Nintendo Switch. And it did when it came out though, and I thought the game looked good and everything, and I still enjoy it even at this day though. And in a way you could say we finally got sort of like the Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy on one system and everything. Now, during the time, there was some data mining going around in terms of supposedly some folks were claiming that they discovered that there was maybe a 60 FPS mode in the game and everything like that. And when announcements came out that we started to see, Switch 2 updates like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom getting like a Switch 2 upgrade with the game running at 60 frames per second, many turned to this and wondering if it was only a matter of time if Xenoblade Chronicles games, or especially Xenoblade Chronicles X, was going to get any kind of upgrade whatsoever and all. And while we've seen some games got some boosts on the Switch 2 though, ranging from like improving some of the frame rates and everything here and there, nothing definitive like a Switch 2 version. But we have seen Nintendo kind of roll out certain games getting a Switch 2 version. As I mentioned before, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is one of those games. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is another game as well. There's been some rumors going around the possibility we could see Pikmin 3 and 4 get like a Switch 2 version and all, and everything like that. Well, an interesting thing that Nintendo did this week, they shadow dropped basically an announcement showing that they have now released a Switch 2 version of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, which basically has the game running at 60 frames per second and everything like that. So it is an interesting shadow drop indeed. According to Nintendo, this is from Nintendo's page though. It reads that, quote, today, the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition Nintendo Switch 2 Edition game for the Nintendo Switch 2 system lands on the Nintendo eShop and My Nintendo Store digitally and all. They point out that this Nintendo Switch 2 Edition game adds up to 4K resolution at a smooth frame rate of 60 frames per second while playing in TV mode, and 1080p and up to 60 frames per second in handheld mode. For players who already have Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch system, an upgrade pack is also available now and all. They also point out that it's also available now digitally, and along with upgrade edition. Now, they also pointed out that a physical version of the game will be available at selected retails as well as online at My Nintendo Store beginning April 16th. So a physical version is going to happen and all. It's worth pointing out that the digital version, at least according to on the Nintendo eShop for the Switch 2 version, will set you back at $64.99. They have it basically $65, while the upgrade pass will cost they have it at $4.99, $5. Now, there are some who don't like the idea of paying for the upgrade pack and everything like that, and I kind of can understand that argument to some extent though. While I don't think $5 is necessarily bad to purchase the upgrade pack, much like how I didn't think developers of Rune Factory Guardian of Zuma charging $10 to pick that game up and everything, for those who wanted to buy, the Switch 2 version, pay $10 for that one. I will admit it's not as good as, say, what we've seen so far, what Xbox has done with Smart Delivery, or the kind of situation we saw where several third-party developers has offered some games, free upgrades to the Switch 2 version. Some examples are High on Life got an upgrade to the Nintendo Switch 2 version of that game. No Man's Sky got a free upgrade from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 version. To even Red Dead Redemption, when Rockstar surprised us by dropping a Nintendo Switch 2 version free to update, which boosts the game up to 60 frames per second and all. So I kind of can see the argument that some folks may have with Nintendo charging this and everything like that though. But at the same time, I also don't think $5 or $10, at least in my view, I don't think it is as bad as some people are making it sound like it is, but I can understand why not everybody would be pleased to paying that amount when other developers will offer it, for free and all. So it depends on your view on that though. But in either case though, it is nice to know that there's now going to be a 60 frames per second on this version, to be exact though. I am curious to see if this is getting a 60 frames per second. Could this mean something like Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3? Could we see a Switch 2 version for those games, and could they offer basically that game running at 60 frames per second? Maybe for the Switch 2 version, maybe for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, maybe they could maybe upgrade some of the visuals, especially if you're playing the game in handheld mode. Believe me, playing that game in handheld mode on Switch 1 was bad. Let's just say it wasn't that great. It was fine on dock mode, but in handheld mode, it was just bad. So maybe they make some improvements with that though, clean out some of the visuals indeed, and maybe offer 60 frames per second. Same with maybe Xenoblade Chronicles Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, the first one, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It'll be interesting to see if that does happen, though. And not to mention, I'm hoping to hear more for what Monolith Software has been working on. They supposedly have a game working on since basically the entire Switch 1 generation, so hopefully we'll see something new from them soon and everything. But overall, I would say this is definitely nice. It's nice that they are offering basically a 60 frames per second mode for those who want to get the Switch 2 version though. Obviously we'll have to wait a little bit longer for those who want the physical version though, and the price point, Again, I understand not everyone's a fan of it though, and I understand your concern, I understand why you may not like the idea, and I don't disagree with some of the arguments though, but at the same time, it is only $5, so that certainly isn't a bad thing, indeed and all. So certainly it is something I will definitely be keeping an eye out, and like I said, I'm hoping that the other Xenoblade Chronicles games get the same treatment indeed. What I don't know so far is for those who are subscribed to the My Nintendo, or the NSO Online, Nintendo Switch Online, though, I don't know if they will offer that update for free, since I remember how with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, if you have Nintendo Switch Online, supposedly you get the update, you get that update for free or anything like that. So I don't know if that will apply here. I assume it is, but I can't say 100% for certain on that part at all. Okay, this concludes this My 2 Cent video for this week. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts on the possibility that Nintendo could raise the price of the Nintendo Switch 2? Do you think that is going to happen? And if so, do you think it could have a negative impact on Switch 2 sales, or do you don't think it will have any impact at all? What are your thoughts about their comment about the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 in terms of them optimizing and bringing the game to other systems and all? Do you think it's going to be an issue, or do you think it's not going to be a non-issue at all? And what are your thoughts about the comments the remake director made in terms of the Switch 2 game key cards? Do you think it is a valid argument, or do you think it's not really a good argument at all? And do you think it could change people's minds about game key cards, or you don't really see this changing their minds on game key cards at all? What are your thoughts about the possibility that Sony could delay the release of PS6 though? Do you think that Sony will do that? And if so, do you think a 2028 or 2029 might be a better date, or even 2030 for that matter? And what are your thoughts about Sony shutting down Blue Point Games? Do you think this was a dumb decision on Sony's part, or do you think it could have been a smart decision on their part? And what are your thoughts about this update for Xenoblade Chronicles X to the Switch 2 edition to have the game running at 60 frames per second though? Do you welcome this Switch 2 edition indeed if you have Xenoblade Chronicles X though? Do you think paying $5 for this upgrade for the Switch 2 version is fine, or do you have a issue with them charging you to pay to get this upgrade and all? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you do like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You could do it through PayPal me, Patreon, or Steam Labs. Links will be in the description of this video, assuming you're watching this on YouTube. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!